Welcome back. All right, we are in question 56. This question says, the method used by the British to facilitate the administration of southern Nigeria was dash, divide and rule. Yes, that is the answer. It's not persuasion, no. It's not dialogue, they didn't dialogue. It wasn't trade association, so the answer is divide and rule. All right, let's go to the next slide. A major function of the warrant chiefs was to dash. Remember the warrant chiefs? Let's go back to the Aba Women's Riot of 1929. Remember, yes, one of the major causes was the warrant chiefs, where there was a rumor where women will be taxed. Already the males, the husbands of those women were already taxed. So there was a rumor that the women will soon be taxed. So it was caused by the warrant chiefs. Remember, just taking you back. All right. Was to dash. A, prevent tribal wars? No. Supervise native courts and markets? No. Take charge of local administration. Take charge of local administration. All right. Number 58. A major feature of the pre-colonial Igbo political system was dash. It was decentralized. It was decentralized. Power was effectively decentralized. So D is your answer. Islam was introduced in northern Nigeria in dash. Please, it is not after the jihad war. A lot of you will want to go to see. It was not during 1804, after the jihad war. It was around the 13th century. So your answer is A. When you see such questions, don't get confused. The jihad did not bring Islam. Islam was already in existence. What Usman Dan Fodio came to do was to set the pace so that Islam will be practiced correctly. So take note of this. 60. Which of the following ethnic groups had centralized administration in pre-colonial Nigeria? It is not the Ibibio, it is not Ijo or Tiv, it is the Hausa. Remember, the emir was at the helm of affairs. The emir was at the helm of affairs. He had the Waziri, the Madawaki, the Galadima, the Hakimis that helped in carrying out activities in the district and also in the empire at that time. Okay, meaning of nationalism. Meaning of nationalism. Well, it says nationalism may be defined as the effort made by Africans. Please underline this word. Yes. Africans to oppose or reject colonial rule. Take note of keywords. It is the love and pride in a country shown by its people or the desire by a racial group to form an independent country. Yeah. It could also be seen as a sense of oneness that emerges from social groups trying to control their destiny, environment, and to defend their group against competing groups. Now, the history of nationalism can be traced back to the era of colonialism. The history of nationalism can be traced back to the era of colonialism, especially nationalism in Africa, in West Africa, in Nigeria. Please take note of this. It's an agitation for self-rule. For self-rule. Take note of this. So these are the key words. Okay. Now let's look at features of nationalism before Second World War. Features of nationalism before Second World War. One of the first things is Western education. Western education provided a common language with which West Africa used to fight colonialism. Like In British West Africa, the common language was English. English. Most of the educated elites were sent to school. Most of the educated elites were sent to school. Then secondly, we have world depression. The First World War. The First World War started in 1914. In 1914, ended around 1918/1919, but mostly this date. Okay, so the First World War caused world economic depression, which brought about untold hardship and agitations for what? Self-government. Then economic exploitation of trade in West Africa. Yes, I told you the British coming to West Africa was for economic gain, for their own interest. Then lack of educational facilities. The missionaries did not have enough money to finance the system. Yes, they brought Western education. They didn't have enough money to finance what? The system. The essence of education was to enable the blacks to read and write, not to produce what? Manpower. Okay. Factors that led to the rise and growth of nationalist movements. The Atlantic Charter. I want you to read this. I want you to read this. The Atlantic Charter at the end of the Second World War. I want you to read this. The anti-colonial posture of United Nations, UNO. The anti-colonial posture of UNO. So these are the external features. Let's look at the internal features. Okay, the third one, the independence of some countries. India got her independence in 1947, Ghana in 1957, about 17 or 18 nations in Africa had their independence in 1960. 1960, about 18 of them gained their independence in this date. So these are the things. Another thing, activities of Pan-African leaders. Kwame Nkrumah, Marcus Garvey, Nnamdi Azikiwe, name them. So these are the things that led to the growth of nationalist movement. You can see the names. And Black American leaders and other blacks in diaspora. So, okay. So the Negro World Movement all preached against racial discrimination from Jamaica, the West Indies, in Africa. They all preached against what? Racial discrimination and liberation of the black nation. Liberation of the black nation from all forms of colonialism. So this was the message that inspired the spirit of what? Nationalism. Let's go. Okay, internal factors that led to the rise and growth of nationalism. Racial discrimination. Yes. So this is another one. Racial discrimination. The way the Europeans treated Nigerians in the civil service added more flames to the growth of nationalism in West Africa. The introduction of elective principles. Elective principles was brought by the Clifford Constitution, remember. So, the introduction of elective principle, the Clifford Constitution brought in elective principle, but it had favored only two places, Lagos and Calabar. It didn't have a national presence. The first political party did not have a national presence. So take note of this. So many Nigerians were disenfranchised. Before you could before you could vote, you must have a certain amount of money as your own. Without that, you can't vote. So these things provoked the growth of nationalism. The return of ex-servicemen, the ones that went to fight in the Second World War, it made them realize that these white men were mere humans like them. So it opened their eyes and it gave agitations for nationalism. The fourth one was the activities of educated elites. I told you the likes of Nnamdi Azikiwe, Herbert Macaulay, Obafemi Awolowo, Kwame Nkrumah, name them. So this was it. Okay. Now, we've come to the part where we answer our questions. Which of the following formalized colonial penetration into West Africa? These questions look tricky. Now, what this question is trying to talk about is talking about the Scrabble. Scrabble for Africa. Scrabble for Africa. The Berlin Conference. Remember the Berlin Conference? The answer is this: 1884 to 1885. Berlin, from November 1884 to February 1885. The Berlin Conference. And funnily enough, this conference did not have any African presence. About 14 countries sat down. That's what we call the scramble. The scramble for Africa. Yes. About 14 to 15 nations sat down to decide the fate of Africa. It's also called the partitioning. Partitioning of Africa. Deciding the fate of Africa. The Berlin Conference is also known as the Congo Conference. Please take note. Yes, it's also known as the Congo Conference. So this was this conference. It was after this conference that colonialism, they divided Africa. The British took their part, the French, the Portuguese, the Spanish, and all that. So this conference did not have any African representative. So the answer is C, Berlin Conference. I had to go down here so that just to remind you of the history of colonial penetration into Africa. All right, let's go to the next question. Nationalism in Nigeria was facilitated by dash. Answer is A, the actions of the veterans of the two world wars and traditional rulers. I told you when the veterans came back, they discovered that the whites were also humans like them. They fought side by side in the war, in the two wars. So the A is the answer. Let's go to the next one. Okay. The 1946 Constitution was remarkable because of dash. Which constitution is 1946? Government student. The answer is the Richards Constitution. The Richards Constitution. The Richards Constitution of 1946. Yes, the Richards Constitution. It brought about, what did the Richards Constitution do? It brought about regionalism, regional government. It was the Richards Constitution that brought about regional government in Nigeria. Please take note. See, remember I said the Clifford Constitution brought what? Elective principles. So it is not the answer. The Richards Constitution, which is B, of 1946. All right, let's go. Okay, the main achievement of the nationalists in Nigeria was dash. Political liberation of the nation. Nigeria became a country. Nigeria became a country in 1960. So the answer is what? Political liberation of the country. Saying independence. This is advanced. Saying independence. Please take note of this. All right, I'll be going for another break. See you shortly. Take care.